Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yael Shavelson, a former intern at the Luce Center, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all again to our Nashville Student Summit. Our next speaker today is Amanda Collins Johnson, a courageous advocate for survivors of sexual assault and a champion for women's self-defense rights. As a college student, she faced a traumatic experience that forever changed her life. Rather than letting this define her, Amanda turned her pain into purpose. She has become a powerful voice for survivors and a tireless advocate for change. Her book, Beyond Survival, offers valuable insights into the healing process and empowers others to rebuild their lives after trauma. Amanda's commitment to empowering women extends beyond her own story. She has spoken at various events, sharing her experiences and inspiring others to prioritize their safety. Her passion for self-defense and women's rights continues to make a significant impact on the world. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Amanda Collins Johnson.
Hi, I am so excited to be here with you ladies. I've been invited here to speak with you today about the importance of the Second Amendment. And before I get started, can any of you tell me what the Second Amendment is? I heard it. It's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking. The right to bear arms. Thank you. Yes, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'm humbled because I've been invited here to speak today regarding the Second Amendment, and I'll be incredibly honest and transparent with you. I'm no expert in the subject matter. My life work has not been researching the correlation between harsher gun laws and crime rate. In fact, when I introduce myself to people, I let them know that I am a stay-home, homeschooling mother to 3 girls. Thank you. For the last 13 years, my main focus has been maintaining a home while educating my 3 daughters. And at times, it is a task that can honestly feel insurmountable, but it is worth every effort. In regards to the Second Amendment, all I have to offer you today are stories of my experiences that have confirmed my resolution to be able to continue to protect myself and my family. And I can also share experiences that I have had with lawmakers who have magnified my convictions about preserving the Second Amendment while having a robust and healthy discussion regarding the intent of the law when it was written and how it applies to us today. So now I'm going to ask you guys another question, and it is I really want an answer. It's not rhetorical. When you hear the Second Amendment or the right to bear arms, please raise your hand if you think that it has really any real effect on your day-to-day lives now in 2024. That is awesome to see. It is really refreshing. How many of you potentially see or vision the proverbial old middle-aged man or old white man holding his rifle when you think or hear Second Amendment? Okay, so for you who rose your hands, what do you have against my dad? Nothing. No, it's fair. My objective today is to demonstrate that while you may not choose to own or carry a firearm, being able to make that choice is imperative to preserving democracy. And as women, preserving that right and having that choice is the war that we should be fighting. I'll be focusing most on the latter of the two, that while you may not choose to carry or own a firearm, as women, being able to make the choice about how we protect our bodies is the war that we should be fighting. In our day-to-day lives, we are the first in line for our defense and for the defense of our families. About 9.5 years ago, I was 8.5 months pregnant with my third daughter. And I took my 4-year-old and my 22-month-old to a mall in Iowa to try to beat the heat because they had insurmountable energy that I could not match. And it was presumably a more self-contained place. As I was helping my 4-year-old balance and walk across the play structure, I saw out of the corner of my eye there was a middle-aged man who came in holding a red child sweater. I saw him because it had been ingrained in me to be aware of my surroundings. It didn't sit right with me, and I stuck with that intuition. Why did I trust that instinct? It's because I've learned in my experience that that gut reaction that we have is God-given. As I was watching him approach the play area, I could see that he was scanning the area. He was clearly with no one. And then I watched him reach over the pony wall and pick up my 22-month-old baby girl who was playing with the magnet wall that was bolted. The magnet manipulative that was bolted to the wall. What would you have done in that situation? I'll tell you what I did. I yanked Annabelle off that structure and I took her under my arm and I made my way as fast as I could to him while I yelled, "Put my daughter down right now. What do you think you're doing? I don't know you. Put her down." My intent, ladies, was to bring as much attention to myself in the situation that I could at that time. My 22-month-old baby girl's feet were dangling in the air while this man froze in shock at my display of discontent. Once I had her in my arms, I asked him very loudly, "Who are you here with?" He failed to answer. Pointing at the sweater he had, I demanded, "Who is that sweater for?" 2 other dads who were there at the same play place came over and helped defuse the situation. And the man grabbed the red sweater and left. That day, like most days, as a stay-at-home mom, I was first in line. Not only for my own safety, but for my child's safety. I was fortunate that day because I had both my children in my arms as that stranger walked out of the mall with the empty child's sweater. The police were called, and I was told that because he had already left the premises and no crime really had been committed, there was nothing that could be done. That particular Saturday, my husband was not with us because he was taking a self-defense and home defense firearms class. Men are hardwired to be the defenders and protectors of our families, and while that should be encouraged and fostered, we can't ignore that oftentimes women are alone with their children at home and in public and serve as first in line to ensuring our well-being. In our day-to-day civilian lives, we are first in line for our personal defense and the defense of our families. The ability to be able to choose how we best defend ourselves should be the war that we are fighting as women. The right to bear arms is a fundamental component to American democracy, balancing the individual liberties with the need of public safety and security. The creators of the Constitution were influenced by their experience of British rule, and they saw the ability to bear arms as an essential for resisting oppression and protecting individual pursuits of life, liberty, and happiness. Therefore, the Second Amendment is first and foremost a safeguard against tyranny. An armed populace served as a check against government overreach. Once during a radio interview, I was asked by the host, Just name me one country, just one country that has benefited from its populace being armed and who has been able to protect themselves against the government. And I laughed because I thought that they were joking. And then I realized they were not. And I looked at them and I said, the one we're sitting in. In fact, we did it not only during the Revolutionary War, which birthed our country, but we also did it again during the War of 1812. So what does that have to do with my daughter almost being stolen out in front of me? The Second Amendment also enshrines the right of individuals to keep and bear arms, assuring that citizens have a means to defend themselves, their families, and their property. That day in the mall, I had my concealed weapon on me. I was fortunate to not have to use it or make it known that I even had it. As I'm talking to you today, I realize that we are living in a time when the mention of firearms or the mention of Second Amendment can be very offensive, and it can cause almost this visceral reaction for some. Because for those individuals, firearms represent absolutely nothing but violence. That's for a variety of different reasons that I'm not here to discredit today. With that being said, I would like to offer you the viewpoint that I can't truly call myself peaceful if I'm not capable of great violence. Because if I'm not capable of great violence, I'm not peaceful, I'm harmless. As the first in line for my protection, I want the choice to be peaceful. My relationship with firearms started when I was 3. I went down to my dad's workshop in what was my favorite nightshirt, his big t-shirt, and asked him to come tuck me in. He was cleaning his firearm, and I was curious. So he picked me up and put me on his workbench and just was very matter-of-fact about what he was doing. He let me know what a firearm was, that it was not a toy. He let me know what it was used for, and just began to instill this deep respect for what a firearm was capable of. I started target practicing when I was 6, and I would later shoot competitively for my high school. The historical and cultural significance of the principles that come from the Second Amendment are of self-reliance, independence, and liberty. And these are principles that were not missed on my family as I was growing up, though they didn't always correlate back to firearms. I was 5 when my mother informed me that my dad and her had made the decision that my sister and I would need to get our second-degree black belts to get our driver's licenses when we turned 16. I was about 9 when I realized that that rule only applied to the Collins household and not to everybody else. It was made well known to both my sister and me that we should take our self-defense seriously. And with martial arts training came the ingrained importance of being situationally aware, along with the ability to attempt to de-escalate any situation before resorting to violence. By the time I reached college, I knew my value as a human being, and I knew my life was worth defending. As first in line to my self-defense, with the 10 years of martial arts training, I was well aware that with the harsh reality was, if I had been met against an opponent much larger than me, who would most likely be a man, the most effective way to defend my body would be with a firearm. And so for my 22nd birthday, I asked my dad to pay for my concealed carry permit class because I wanted to be self-reliant and independent participant in my self-defense. My now husband and I took the class together for our 6-month dating anniversary, and my dad not only supplied the firearm and ammo for me to take the class, but he also gifted me my first handgun once I was issued my concealed carry permit. Sorry, I need water. I did everything I could to ensure that I would never be an unmatched victim. However, Nevada legislators had drawn an arbitrary line around the university campus and declared them a gun-free zone, and still do. So as a law-abiding citizen, whenever I stepped foot on the university campus, I had to surrender my Second Amendment right. This keeps falling back. Oh, there we go. Sorry. The very law that was meant to ensure my safety had an unintended consequence and rendered me harmless. And it would ultimately affect the whole community. October 22nd, 2007 was a regular Monday night for me. The only thing that seemed different was the midterm that was waiting for me in class. At 10 p.m. when the class was over, I walked to the parking garage with a group of women, with a group of colleagues, because it had been ingrained in me that there is safety in numbers. When we reached the parking garage, which I had parked in because it was seemingly safer to park there than it was to park in off-campus parking, I didn't see anything between myself and my vehicle. And so I wished everybody a good night. I was the only one that had parked on the ground floor, and they headed up the stairs, and I headed to my vehicle. And as I made my way to the car, to my vehicle, it became abundantly clear to me that what I had not seen was a man that was hunched behind the wheel well of a truck. As I passed him, he grabbed me from behind, forced me to the ground, placed a pistol to my temple, clicked off the safety, told me not to say anything, and then he brutally raped me. As first in line, I was rendered harmless. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that the university police cruisers were parked across the way. And at the same moment, I knew that the university office had closed. And so as I laid there, completely defenseless, I knew no one was coming for me. I could see in his eyes that he had the propensity to kill, and as my life hung in the balance of a trigger pull, I wondered how my family was going to find me. And to be completely honest with you, I was really hoping I was on my way to meet Jesus, because actually living after surviving such a horrible crime seemed impossible. My attack lasted about 8 minutes, though it just took me about 1.5 minutes to explain it to you. So say it with me. We've all heard it. What doesn't kill you? False. What good is surviving if you're not really living? I've learned that what doesn't kill you can make you wish you were dead. The terror I felt in the moments during my attack continued to haunt me for the next 13 months as my attacker was at large, in ways that only other survivors can really understand. In November of 2008, the man who raped me was captured by the Reno Police Department, and he would later be convicted for not only raping me at gunpoint, but kidnapping and raping a second victim while raping and murdering his last known victim. Discontent is the first step towards progress, ladies. As constitutionally minded individuals, we have an obligation to this country to use the voice that has been given to us to protect our Second Amendment rights through education, critical thinking, constructive discourse, because the power of willful ignorance can never be overstated. To be honest, before my attack, I never really thought twice about having to leave my firearm at home. It was annoying because I didn't understand why I was deemed responsible and competent and able to make sound judgment everywhere else in my daily life. But somehow, when I crossed this arbitrary line, I wasn't. But I'm a rule follower, and I followed the rules. And I honestly believed that as a young college student, I didn't have a bone in the fight. I never fathomed that anything of this magnitude would ever happen to me. I'm smart. I'm situationally aware. I was constantly on my sorority sisters about being aware of their surroundings and not putting themselves in precarious situations. And then I lived through what was my worst fear. I was wrong when it came to the belief of the lie that my voice doesn't have value. As image bearers of the Creator, we always have the right to stand up and to say that our dignity, our lives, and our bodies are worth protecting. My children and my home are worth protecting. And if my safety cannot be guaranteed by a third party, then I should be able to choose how I'm going to protect myself. I've been before a lot of legislators, and some in private quarters have really empathized with me and said, oh, if I had been through what you'd been through, I'd want to be armed all the time too. Let me encourage you, ladies, by saying that if you don't have a story like mine, that is worth preserving and worth protecting. It's human nature to disassociate with harsh realities like the one I'm sharing with you, and to kind of brush it off as, oh, that poor girl, until that poor girl becomes you or your friend or a loved one that you're left with the task of loving life back into. The woman I was before entering the parking garage that night is not the same woman that was driving out. There's no way around the fact that this was a defining moment in my life. But I was faced with the choice to choose how this moment was going to define me. My prayer became, and has continued to be, let me not die while I'm still alive. When tragedy occurs, we can give into the void and the emptiness that fills our heart, our lungs, and constricts our ability to think and even breathe. Or we can try to find meaning. It's okay to exist in the void for a bit, and it's natural to grieve. I would even say it's healthy to grieve what's been lost and what's been taken. And I can be honest with you that future moments in my life are going to be spent in that grief. But when I'm able, I choose life, and I choose meaning. What about you? I've learned everybody has a story. Trauma is trauma. But I've seen it time and again as image bearers of our Creator, we have what it takes within us to choose life and meaning. But it doesn't just happen. It is a choice, and it has to be pursued relentlessly. It's been anything but easy, but I have learned that the 4 key components that I need on a daily basis are 1, my backbone. That's my relationship with Jesus. If you think about our bodies, our backbone holds us up. It's the core. It's what everything comes back to and stems from. What is your backbone made of? The second is my rib cage. If you think about the body, the rib cage is charged with protecting all our vital organs. So what does that look like in my day-to-day life? That's my community. That's the people that I have chosen very carefully to be brought into my inner circle. And aside from my husband, it has come with trial and error, but it is critical. If you're brought into someone's ribcage, love life back into them. It's an honor and it's a privilege. And if you don't know what to say, I'm going to give you the permission now to show up and shut up. I invite you to never underestimate the power of your presence with the willingness to sit in the uncomfortable and endure the inconsolable moments with somebody. And if you absolutely want something to stay, you can start with, I believe you. It's not your fault. And thank you for trusting me with your story. Who's in your ribcage? And most importantly, whose ribcage are you privileged enough to be a part of? Third, I've learned that I need my funny bone. I had to learn to laugh again. And I've had to learn not to take myself so seriously. It doesn't mean that I laugh at what happened to me. There's absolutely nothing funny about that. But when life offers the ability to laugh, I take advantage of it. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries the bones. None of us is getting out of this life alive, ladies, so let's have some fun while we're at it. What brings you joy? The fourth component, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. I need my wishbone. I had to shift my thinking from why me to what now? What about you? What is your wishbone? How can you change the lingering question of why me to what now? My wishbone has taken time to grow and develop and has taken many forms over the last several years, but has led to 3 consistent points. 2 short years after my attack, I started challenging the notion that gun-free zones are safe zones, and I began pleading with lawmakers to pass campus carry because what I had endured, I wouldn't wish on anybody. The reactions and the questions that I received from lawmakers as I started sharing my story fueled my desire to educate society about the lifelong effects of rape and to change the cultural mindset around rape, while giving hope to survivors and equipping them to live a full life after enduring soul murder. I never thought that seeking after Second Amendment rights on college campuses would lead me to wanting to equip and empower other survivors to be able to reclaim a full life. But every time I share my story, I would have several people come up to me after and share their story. And I started getting asked, how did you reclaim your life? And I started getting asked that question long before I actually had. And so it ignited a fire within me to be able to lead the breathing dead back to the land of the living. In order to do that, though, I had to find my own way. I'm still on the lifelong journey, and my book that was mentioned earlier, Beyond Survival, serves as a guide to other survivors to give insight to our loved ones and anyone else who works or advocates for survivors. While challenging the notion for gun-free zones, I have found myself before several state level judiciary committees across the country. The question of my life is and will remain to be, what could have been different if I had had my firearm that day? It is a question that has kept me up for countless sleepless nights as I have replayed the worst 8 minutes of my life over and over again. There have been a lot of different outcomes, but one still remains. At some point during my attack, I would have been able to stop it as it was in progress, and consequently, 2 other rapes would have been prevented, and 3 lives would have been preserved. In my quest to prevent the same horror that I have lived through, I am often told, your case is just so rare. I will concede. My case is just so very rare, but hear me, because the fact that my rape was on campus is not what makes my case rare. For a variety of reasons, most rapes go unreported, as did mine initially. And while I'm talking to you about one incident involving 2 other cases, we have no way of knowing just how many assaults actually occur on university campuses. What we do know, according to the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, is that 1 in 4 women will be raped while attending college, and a third of those rapes will occur on the university campus that they are attending. 90% of victims know their attacker. In the 35 minutes that I have been given to spend with you today, 30 women will be raped in the U.S. alone. And at some point in their lives following that assault, 7 of those women will commit suicide. A study from the Journal of Interpersonal Violence found that 126 admitted perpetrators had committed 907 sexual assaults involving 882 different victims. That's an average of 7 victims, some more than one, for perpetrators that are serving for 1 sexual assault. So with this information, ladies, what I can tell you is that what is so rare about my case, I'm talking about it publicly. I didn't know my attacker, and my attacker now sits on death row. Fewer than 6% of rapes end in arrest, and fewer than 1% of those end in conviction. I have found myself sitting across legislators pleading for the ability to be able to adequately defend my body, my pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and have been told, statistics just aren't on your side. Chances are he would have taken your gun and used it against you. This was several years ago in Colorado when the legislation was in place to repeal campus carry. She was correct. Statistics are not on my side. I was 1 in 4 women that was raped on campus that had reported it. And I have to go back to my original point that while I'm talking to you about the Second Amendment enshrining my right to protect my body, the Second Amendment was also written so that I could defend myself against the very people that were sitting across from me that room that night, passing policy that affects my day-to-day life and affects your day-to-day life. At the end of that trial, the committee did vote to pass to repeal campus carry in Colorado, and a handful of those state representatives requested an armed escort to their vehicle that night. No opportunity was offered to me as a law-abiding citizen who is exercising my right to challenge the government by engaging in civil discourse. Thankfully, a few weeks later, that repeal would not pass on the floor. During that legislative season or session, the University of Colorado did release pamphlets and statements encouraging students about how to prevent sexual assault, with suggestions like, make yourself less desirable to your attacker by vomiting, urinate on yourself, start crying, tell them you have a sexually transmitted disease, proving that there is a lack of understanding that rape has absolutely nothing to do with sex and is all about a display of violence and control while using sex as a vehicle to do so. I've been assured by countless other legislators that I would have been just so much worse off than I realized had I had my firearm that night, because he could have pulled the gun, taken my gun away from me and used it. I was being raped at gunpoint. How much worse off could I have been? And this led to the second part of my wishbone. I have experienced collectively that as a society, our culture does not understand that rape is actually soul murder. Not a single layer of my being was left unscathed that night. And I have to believe that If there was a better understanding about the lifelong, wide-reaching ripple effect about this particular crime, we would do whatever we could to keep it from continuing to happen. And yet, as I'm standing before you today, every 68 seconds, someone is raped in the U.S., and less than 20% are reported. Every day, 70 women commit suicide at some point following a sexual assault. Every day, we lose 70 women. And for this reason, being able to choose how we defend our bodies, ladies, is the war that we should be fighting. I have a full, beautiful life. I've been married for 16 years. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and I am so thankful for that. But as I am standing here today, I can honestly tell you that I still wish I would have been given the chance to preserve my dignity, even if that meant that I died while doing so. 4 short years after Roe v. Wade was passed in 1977, the Supreme Court passed, 4 short years after Roe v. Wade was passed, Coker v. Georgia was ruled in the Supreme Court, which states that the sentence for death for the crime of rape is grossly disproportionate and excessive punishment, and is therefore forbidden by the Eighth Amendment as cruel and unusual punishment, because the rationale was the rapist does not take a life. In short, the death penalty as punishment for rape was deemed to be unconstitutional. Yet every time the argument for maintaining Roe v. Wade or reinstilling Roe v. Wade comes up, the first argument I have heard is, what if a woman gets raped? For as long as I can remember, women's choice has been the fixation target during every election term, and it always centers around reproductive rights and never around the right for women to choose how we protect ourselves. This last election was no exception, as several states were voting on abortion rights, and the majority of the commercials I saw and texts I received continued to strum the emotional strings of incidents of rape resulting in pregnancy. Nearly all arguments I have heard for the pro-abortion movement circle around if a woman gets raped. If we as a society collectively really cared about women getting raped, like the pro-choice movement claims, the first thing we would do is overturn Coker v. Georgia. We would prosecute and convict rapists and give them harsher sentences. And we would make services more accessible for victims. We would have more accessible services for victims if we really cared about women getting raped, because I can tell you from firsthand experience that we need a whole lot more than immediate access to an abortion. If the goal of women's rights movement was truly to keep the government from overreaching and keeping the lawmakers out of our bodies, then why can't we allow women to choose how we protect our bodies in the first place? Somehow owning a firearm and wanting to effectively defend myself is viewed as undignified and spurs on the victim-blaming culture. Other options have been suggested, like call boxes, tasers, pepper spray, calling for an escort. And when my rapist was at large, the University of Nevada, Reno handed out these whistles for women to blow should we need help. I've shared this in other forums. And shortly after I ended, a woman came up to me and showed me the whistle on her keychain and said, "This is the whistle I blew as I was being raped while no one came to help me." In general, the message I have received is it's better for me to retreat as much as I possibly can, call for help, and wait for a government official to arrive with their guns to help me, rendering me defenseless and harmless as first in line. The choice to participate in our own defense should be left to the individual, and that individual choice should not be mandated by the government. And we as law-abiding citizens shouldn't have to hand over our safety to a third party. The legislators in Nevada continue to effectively legislate women into being victims by stripping away our Second Amendment right, because they're seemingly more intimidated by law-abiding citizens sitting in class with their permitted firearm than they are of the criminal waiting for us on campus. There's been 2 legislative sessions when campus carry had the votes to get out of committee and to pass on the floor and in their counterpart, and it was held up and effectively killed because the chairman refused to simply bring it to a vote. The message I have received silently, yet clearly, is that women getting raped on our university campuses is more acceptable than allowing law-abiding citizens to choose how we want to protect ourselves. Guns are what continue to be the most offensive option because to some they continue to represent only violence. And again, I'm going to offer to you that if I am not capable of great violence, I'm not peaceful, I'm harmless. Our lawmakers know it, and our criminals intent on doing harm know it. I have asked countless lawmakers, how does rendering me defenseless protect you against a violent crime? It's been well over a decade, and I have yet to receive an adequate answer. And I think they may assume that it's a rhetorical question, but it's not. I legitimately want an answer. Whether you want to be or not, ladies, you are first in line when it comes to your defense. There was nothing in place to keep my attacker from coming onto the university campus, and there's nothing currently now. Currently, only 11 states permit concealed carry in some form or fashion. During his sentencing, my attacker received a 1-year enhancement charge for having a firearm where he shouldn't have. He also received the death penalty and 4 consecutive life sentences, and so you can ask me, what more would you have wanted? Well, it sets a precedent that I had more to lose that night as a law-abiding citizen if I carried my firearm and if I hadn't. Had I had my firearm, I would have faced potential expulsion from school. He was not a student. I would have lost my ability to have my firearm or to have a concealed carry permit and face potential jail time if the prosecuting attorney had chosen to bring charges against me. It's wild for me to think that in 4.5 years, my oldest daughter is going to be stepping foot on a university as a freshman. And when she becomes first in line to her defense, I want her to be able to choose to be harmless, to be peaceful, and to not be forced to be harmless. I want her to be able to choose how she's going to defend her body. I want to thank you for listening to me today and allowing me to share my experiences with you, and I will open it up for questions now.
Thank you so much for your powerful message, Amanda. So you guys can line up here and then again say your name, your age, or where you're from, and your school.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for talking. My name is Leah Mergener, and I go to Christendom College. And you mentioned your daughter's heading to college in a few years. What is your safety plan for her if she chooses a college that has a gun-free zone rule?
So that is something that my husband and I think, have talked about quite a bit, and with her also. And it's unfortunately the same thing that I had for myself. We've also let her know that she needs to take jiu-jitsu classes so that she's able to potentially meet an attacker with equal force in that manner. But as far as it, I'm sorry, like as a mother, I just don't even like wish my story to be her story in any shape or form. And the safety plan is a lot of what we are left to contend with today, as far as what I was given: safety in numbers, situational awareness, and being able to hopefully encourage people to continue to speak out should things like that happen, knowing that it's not their fault, that there is no shame in what's been done to them, because it doesn't define them or make them less valuable, and to encourage people like yourselves to change policy for more for harsher punishments for offenders.
Hello, my name is Meg Williamson. I'm a recent graduate from Christendom College. Thank you so much for being so open to share with us today, and very powerful witness. My question for you is, as women, for those of us who have not been in similar situations at all, how can we put a fight up and get our voices heard? Because I feel like in some ways, if we haven't had a situation of what right do we have to like propose certain things, and it almost seems like it's less valid because you don't have any stories to back it up yet. So I don't know if you have any advice on that.
Yeah, your story, if you don't have mine, is worth preserving and is every bit as valid. Your desire and your choice to want to protect your body and preserve your story of not being a victim or a survivor is worth preserving. And so don't fall into that lie of someone telling you, like, oh, you don't have a bone in this fight, or that your opinion is less valid because you don't have my story. My goal in sharing my story is to ignite a fire in all of you to want to preserve your story if you don't have one like me, and to go to state legislators and ask them for you to be able to allow for you to be able to choose how you want to defend your body. And I mean, getting involved in local politics is incredibly important because, as I said, there's 11 states right now that allow campus carry, but they don't outright explicitly allow it. Some campuses allow it outside of buildings, other campuses don't allow it inside buildings that make policy, and so you have to be up on what the current local law is for your state, but then utilize your right as a citizen of this country and have conversations with the representatives that are making those policies, and let them know what your wishes are so that they can bring them, hopefully, to the table for everybody else that is in the legislation to vote on as well.
This is our last question.
Okay.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I'm Olivia Haley. I'm from the University of Florida. I was just curious, what are your thoughts on women who have survived sexual assault who do pursue to get an abortion if they do get pregnant?
What are my thoughts on it? Well, that's a loaded question. I am very, very thankful that that is not something that I was faced with when I was younger. I would never sit across from a woman who has been through what I've been through and tell them that, I guess, impose an unwanted pregnancy on them in that manner. What I would recommend is for them to educate themselves on all the options and educate themselves fully on what an abortion is, what it entails, and what the aftermath is, because I don't know that having a woman go from one violent act to a different type of violent act on her body is really the answer. And I really wish that we could see more wraparound support to survivors who are left with an unwanted pregnancy from a violent act, to be able to help them walk through and make that decision with a more robust understanding of what that is.
Great, so we're gonna have a photo line again on that side, and give one more round of applause to Amanda Collins.